Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Russian President Vladimir Putin played host to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently in the beautiful Black Sea resort of Sochi. Now, the two are political pals. This visit marked the 9th meeting in 2 years. 5 of those meetings have taken place in Russia. Israel and Russia have quite a lot to talk about. The central themes of the discussions between Putin and Netanyahu are very straightforward. To use the Hebrew vernacular, which actually comes from the Arabic, the discussions are very dugri. That means extremely practical and to the point. They are pleasant and diplomatically convivial, but the gravity of the issues requires dugri. Russia and Israel need to make absolutely certain that they do not quite literally clip one another's wings in Syria and Lebanon. The air forces and ground forces of both countries are active in the arena, and nobody wants either military to accidentally or mistakenly shoot at the other. Major General Amir Eshel, the outgoing head of the Israeli Air Force, announced during his exit ceremony that, of late, Israel successfully carried out over 100 strikes into Lebanon and Syria. The focus of the attacks was the destruction of weapons being transferred into Hezbollah's hands, weapons that would have altered the balance of power in the region. None of those strikes involved engagement with the Russians, and there were almost no retaliatory strikes by Hezbollah. Russia and Israel also need to work together in the quest to oust ISIS. One of Israel's biggest worries is that Iran is gaining traction and assuming a larger and larger role in both Syria and Lebanon. And it is becoming more and more evident that Iran is there to stay. In face-to-face conversations and over their secure phone lines, Netanyahu has emphasized to Putin that Israel will not tolerate Iran in that role. Iran, Israel contends, cannot take up a permanent residence either by proxy or with their own boots on the ground on 2 of their borders. When the Iranians preach about wiping Israel off the map, they're not merely spewing rhetoric. Tehran pursues policies and supports groups that attack Israel, not just to maim her, but to mortally wound her. Iran and her cohorts present a very real threat to Israel's existence. Iran has gravitas in the region, real power, and significant and dangerous weapons. Iran can both outfit Hezbollah, and they can also shoot the weapons themselves. In a joint press conference in Sochi, Netanyahu said, quote, and this is the quote itself, Iran is increasing its efforts to establish its military foothold in Syria. That is dangerous for Israel, the Middle East, and, I believe, the whole world. Iran is already in advanced stages of taking over Iraq and Yemen, and in effect, it also controls Lebanon. Netanyahu continued, we are all defeating ISIS in a concerted international effort, and that is welcome. What is not welcome is Iran moving in everywhere ISIS moves out. We do not forget for 1 minute that Iran continues to threaten Israel's destruction every day. It is arming terrorist organizations and itself instigating terrorism, and it is developing intercontinental missiles with the goal of arming them with nuclear warheads. For all these reasons, Israel continues to oppose Iran's entrenchment in Syria. Netanyahu made it perfectly clear. If the stars align for Iran and they become dominant, establish the presence in the region, Israel will not hesitate to strike. Putin understands that Netanyahu was speaking from the heart and from his gut. He understands that Netanyahu was protecting and preserving Israel's military and historical mandate. But that does not mean that Putin agrees with Netanyahu or that he will join Israel's campaign to derail Iran. And unfortunately, despite a lobbying effort in D.C., Israel was not able to secure an agreement from Washington that Iran not play a political role or military role in Syria. Israel will not be swayed. Israel will do whatever is necessary to keep itself safe. It will not rely on Russia. It will not depend on the United States. At this point, we can all assume that if Iran remains strong in Syria and in parts of Lebanon, Israel will engage Iran and attack Iran directly. But one little spark could set off a very large explosion, and the entire region could be engulfed in flames. Continuing the theme of Russia. Russia has always played by its own set of rules, but they don't always win the game. That seems to be changing. Russia is becoming more powerful and more influential with each international crisis. Their tentacles spread out further and further. Their reach extends into the Middle East and Asia. Russia has been pretty quiet on the subject of North Korea, but don't misread their silence for disinterest. On the contrary, when it comes to North Korea, Russia has significant interests. A little-known fact is Russia is one of 3 nations to share a border with North Korea. North Korea, on the other hand, is only one of 14 countries to share a border with Russia. The other 2 nations bordering North Korea are China and South Korea. Russia is a very large country. It takes longer to fly from one end of Russia to the other end than it takes to fly from New York to Moscow. The border with North Korea, however, stretches only 11 miles in total distance. It's Russia's shortest border, and in this case, however, size is inconsequential. The Russian-North Korean border is hugely important. It's a border crossing also. To travel from one country to the other, one must cross over the Tumen River by way of the Friendship Bridge. The mode of transportation is by train, and only passengers that are allowed on that train are Russians and North Koreans. The train that passes over that bridge is the longest direct train line in the world, running from Pyongyang to Moscow, a distance of 6,383 miles. We know that Russia has influence over North Korea. What we don't know is how Russia will wield that influence, and if and how North Korea will react. As joint exercises took place between the United States and South Korea, North Korea decided to launch another rocket. And the Russians used the occasion to send several Tu-95 bombers, they're also called Bears, to fly over the Sea of Japan, the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the Pacific Ocean. The Bears are Russia's nuclear delivery system. This was so significant a move that on Russia's part that both Japan and South Korea sent fighter jets to escort the bombers and make certain that their intentions were kept in check and did not turn aggressive. Accompanying the Russian Bears were Russians' Sukhoi 35S fighter jets and an A-50 advanced warning plane. This is important. The A-50 is similar to the U.S. AWACS, mobile radar and communication stations. Both AWACS and A-50s can track movements and be used as control systems for smart bombs. They see the entire field of engagement for hundreds of miles. At first glance, it would appear that this Russian move was to check the military intentions of the United States, Japan, and South Korea. It was, but it was also more than that. Russia was interested in attracting another audience, North Korea. With this move, Russia was sending a direct message to North Korea on multiple levels. Russia is responding to the new sanctions imposed on North Korea, China, and them by the United States Treasury. The purpose of the new sanctions is ultimately to restrict North Korean weapons industries. Sending the nuclear bomber and its escorts, Russia was making it very clear to everyone in the region that they are a military might to contend with. They are telegraphing to the entire world that Russians are a major player, not just in the region, but in the world. They're telling Washington that they can slap as many sanctions as they want on Moscow, and Moscow will still emerge triumphant. For North Korea, the message is inescapable. This demonstration of air might was not initiated in defense of North Korea. It was an opportunity for Russia to strut its stuff and pound its chest. The other players in the region understand full well that Russia is in the process of expanding its role. North Korea needed a little convincing. Like other nations, they got the memo, but until now, they didn't realize its importance. Now, however, it should be perfectly clear to them that Russia does not play the same way the West plays. The United States has been patient with North Koreans. The Russians are not. For years, the United States allowed itself to play a game of cat and mouse with the North Koreans. The Russians just pounce. two questions arise. One, will Russia do something more drastic to shake up North Korea than simply sending off a scary but symbolic flight? And two, will North Korea get the message and respond positively or not? Time will tell. There is no informed, intelligent way to predict the actions of this interaction between Russia and North Korea. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. It is anti-Semitism, and in this case, anti-Semitism in Switzerland. Recently, there was a case of a hotel in Switzerland that hung a sign asking their Jewish guests to shower before using the pool. First up is a column that was published in the JTA on August 18, 2017, and it was written by Kanan Lifshitz. Lifshitz went to interview the hotelier and the worker who posted the sign. The sign caused a diplomatic uproar and was being dealt with at the highest levels of diplomacy. Here is how Lifshitz begins. A chuckle tickled my throat as Ruth Thoman, a Swiss hotelier who posted the signs urging her Jewish guests to shower before entering the pool, assured me that she has nothing against Jews. To be clear, I don't find racism particularly amusing, especially not these days. But there was something comical about how her earnest voice, she was speaking broken English with a thick Swiss German accent, contrasted with the glaringly discriminatory character of the laminated signs that she posted last week in her Paradise Apartments hotel in Arosa, near Zurich, provoking outrage in Israel and beyond. Lifshitz is correct. There is a certain amount of humor at work. The humor is situational. The Swiss people involved are so straight that they could fit into a slapstick comedy routine. Their best response is something like, I don't hate Jews, but they need to take a shower. This is way beyond, I can't be anti-Semitic, my best friends are Jewish. Lifshitz continues in this way. The shower signs, which Israel's foreign ministry escalated into a diplomatic incident with Switzerland, seem to me an open and shut case. But as I listened earlier this week to Thoman's passionate explanations and apology, the signs should have been addressed to all the guests instead of the Jewish ones. She said, near tears, I realized that despite the damning evidence and anger against her, she was probably a tolerant person who, for lack of tact, was being pilloried internationally with devastating consequences for her business. Lifshitz continued to show just how crazy the situation was. Listen to this exchange about whether she hated Jews. You have to understand, she pleaded with me, the sign about the refrigerator goes to the Jews because I kindly allowed only the Jews to keep their food in the staff's refrigerator because I know they bring their own food, she said. Her Orthodox Jewish guests needed to store their food because of their kosher issues, she explained. My God, if I had something against Jews, I wouldn't take them as guests, she said. And so the interviewer now asks about the sign in the shower. So what about the shower signs, I asked. Well, Thoman paused, searching for words. I'm sorry to say, but I know the hotel, and the only people who go in without taking a shower are the Jewish guests. And how exactly does she know? I inquired, bracing for comments on body odor. They go in wearing their T-shirts, Thoman said, adding that the behavior drew complaints from other guests who found it unsanitary. Wow, this is just so unusual. But it really is anti-Semitism when the anti-Semite does not realize it or recognize that they are really anti-Semites. As an aside, many Orthodox people wear T-shirts for modesty, not just in Switzerland, but in pools and beaches around the world. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, Tzipi Hotovely, demanded an apology from the Swiss government and everyone involved. The minister blamed Europe and even blamed the Swiss for their support of the Palestinians. And this is just one other example. Lifshitz now responds saying that Israel often shouts anti-Semitism and overreacts, but, he writes, Hotovely demanded the Swiss government publicly condemn Thoman's actions, which she said indicated the prevalence of anti-Semitism throughout Europe, a continent of some 750 million residents. As is often the case when Jerusalem wades into the complicated debate about anti-Semitism in Europe, I felt Hotovely's claim was not only overblown and cynical, but also based on ignorance of the facts of the case at hand. But almost immediately I had to reconsider that judgment too. Now Lifshitz concludes, using humor and showing the real anti-Semitism that exists in Switzerland. He writes, in the latest twist of the story that began with 2 laminated A4 sheets of paper, a Swiss lawmaker, the socialist Roger Tenez, came along and proved Tocqueville's point. If anyone should apologize for the Swiss hotel incident, he wrote on his Facebook page, then it is Israel, quote, for its excessive tolerance of ultra-Orthodox Jews who prevent peace in Palestine, unquote. Following an outcry, Tenez deleted the remark and apologized. After all, he said, he has nothing against Jews. Lifshitz does a wonderful job of showing just how absurd the situation has and was. Second up is a column from the New York Times and was published online on August 19, 2017. The column is by Daniel Gordis. Gordis is the Koret Distinguished Fellow at the Shalem College in Jerusalem. His latest book is Israel, A Concise History of a Nation Reborn. He is a prolific writer and an essayist and a popular lecturer in the United States. Gordis is trained as a conservative rabbi. The column is called Watching Charlottesville from Jerusalem. Gordis begins. In the almost 20 years since we moved our 3 young children from the bucolic street in West Los Angeles to a Jerusalem apartment in the rough and tumble Middle East, my wife and I consciously taught them that in going from the United States to Israel, we had not been fleeing anything. We had moved not from something, but to something, the country in which they were born. We reminded them, time and again, not only was the greatest democracy on the planet, after which Israel largely models itself, but also has been unique in Jewish history. Everywhere else, Jews had lived tenuously, do their best to be accepted until their host community eventually tired of them. When that happened, as in England in 1290, Spain in 1492, Germany in 1933, horror ensued. Gordis says that in the United States, he experienced no anti-Semitism of significance. He writes, America, even in its occasional ugly moments, was fundamentally different. Yes, many Americans harbored no love for Jews, but the country's proud self-image as a nation of immigrants and, more important, the rights guaranteed in its revolutionary constitution usually demanded that they, more or less, keep that to themselves. Growing up in Baltimore in the 1960s and 1970s, I experienced not a single instance of blatant anti-Semitism. He now describes how his students reacted to Charlottesville and how his son, now 28, in law school in Jerusalem, declared when he was 7 that there could never be a Holocaust because the United States would stop it. He told his son that a day may come when the U.S. will not stop it. He asked, has that day arrived? Gordis continues, has it? I pray not, though it is too early to tell. But here is what we do know. The tiny embattled country our family now calls home has raised a generation of young people to understand that ultimately the only people who can be fully trusted to safeguard the safety of the Jews are the Jews. For having afforded our children a chance to grow up with no sense of vulnerability that we knew growing up in America, we owe Israel and its founders a profound debt of gratitude. It is a debt that I don't believe we fully appreciated until Charlottesville and its disgraceful aftermath. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. Today I want to discuss 2 cartoons. Both are by A.F. Branco, and they're both from legalinsurrection.com and theconstitution.com. The first cartoon was published on August 21st, 2017, and is entitled Larger Than Life. There are 2 sides of the cartoon, and they are connected with a wire. On the left side is a TV screen with a red warning. It reads, objects in this box may appear larger than actual size. The TV is actually connected with a wire to a cameraman on the other side of the cartoon, and he's filming. His camera reads mainstream media. And he's filming a tiny little people, a group of gathering of the KKK and neo-Nazis, the images we see on the TV screen on the other side. All the while, on the right side of the screen is a huge plume of black smoke. And the smoke and fire, there's a large group of people under the sign that reads Antifa. The second cartoon is also by A.F. Branco, and was published August 16, 2017. It's entitled, "To the Dustbin of Hysteria, Comically Incorrect." A Civil War general is on a horse called U.S. History. The caption reads, "Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it." A white hand called liberalism is holding an eraser which has political correctness written on it. The hand holding the eraser is erasing the statue. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Iran convicted a Shiite religious leader and sentenced him to death. He was convicted of blasphemy and creating a cult. In reality, the Shiite leader created a New Age style of Shiite Islam. It's a form of liberalizing Islam. His lawyer will appeal the decision. There was a similar case in 2014, and after appeal, the death penalty was reduced, and the cleric remains in prison for life. Iranians are looking to control the growth of Shiite Islam. They cannot tolerate and do not understand the growth of religious ideas in the modern world. Ultimately, Iran will not be able to restrict the natural evolution of ideas. That has always influenced Islam. For centuries, external forces improved Islam. Shutting out those forces is a recipe for failure for Iran. Anti-Semitism is up 30% in California in the first quarter of 2017. And California leads the country in anti-Semitic acts. California? How is that possible? The stories are hair-raising. Fourth graders are being told by their classmates that Hitler should have burned them all in ovens. This happened in the context of a young Jewish girl describing her trip to Memphis, Tennessee, and discussing the rise of the KKK and neo-Nazism there. Alameda, situated just outside San Francisco, and is considered by Californians to be a liberal bastion, has been teeming with anti-Semitic attacks. One might think that in this uber-liberal environment, anti-Semitism would be totally unacceptable. But it is happening all over, especially in schools. The numbers and the examples come from the ADL. This does not bode well. On September 25th, the entire Middle East might explode. That is the day that the Kurds of the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq will vote for independence. 5 million people will cast their votes, and almost everyone will opt for independence. The Shiites, who now govern Iraq, have said that they will not recognize an independent Kurdish state in Iraq. But the truth is that the Iraqi army is preoccupied fighting ISIS, and they are no match for the Kurds. In addition, the Kurds already control their border in Iraq. The Turks and the Iranians will be very upset also with Kurdish independence. 75% of the Kurds in the world actually live in their countries. And the Kurds are split between these two nations of Iran and Turkey. And that is where the war may emerge. The Turks will do anything to prevent a Kurdish state. Iran does not want to cede any of its land, nor do they want their Kurds running to join the new Iraqi Kurdish state. If a battle breaks out, the conflict will be between Kurds and against Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. There will be huge losses. But in the end, an independent state might indeed emerge, carved out of Turkey, Iran, and of course Iraq. And the other possibility is a massacre in which millions of Kurds will be murdered at the hands of the Turks and the Iranians. A new law was activated in Israel. Citizens who engage in hostile acts against the state will have their citizenship revoked. Aryeh Deri, Israel's Minister of the Interior, listed 20 people who will have their citizenship revoked. The 20 were convicted of joining ISIS. Aryeh Deri has also mentioned that those who use their cars to murder and ram Israelis may also be on the citizenship chopping block. I would guess that all convicted terrorists might fall into this category. I hope, and the hope is in this law, that this new legal power will influence terrorists to stop their actions. Israeli citizenship brings with it many benefits. Iran is striking back at the United States. Iranians are saying that it will only take them 5 days to ramp up their uranium production to 20%, enough to make a nuclear bomb. Official Iranian media quoted Ali Akbar Salehi, head of Iran's atomic energy, saying, quote, "If we make the determination, we will be able to resume 20% enrichment in at most 5 days," unquote. As part of the deal agreed upon in 2015, Iran destroyed or exported almost all of its uranium that was enriched over 20%. But there's more. Now they say that if the U.S. does not hold up the agreement, they will also violate the agreement, and they can easily start enriching uranium. This is Iran's countermove to Trump's assertion that the United States will stop the deal because Iran is violating it. Iran is saying, in essence, whatever you think is a violation will pale in comparison to what we will do if the United States breaks the agreement. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the famous quote about history repeating itself really goes like this? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. That is the quote. Not all the variants that we hear about, like learn from history, remember history, learn from their mistakes, or read history. I've seen so many misquotes. The aphorism actually comes from a character named George Santayana. He lived from 1863 to 1952. Born in Italy and moves to the United States. Went to Boys Latin in Boston and Harvard College. Then he taught there. He goes back to Italy, giving up his Harvard teaching position in 1912. He was a philosopher, an essayist, a poet, and a novelist. This is probably his most famous quote, and it comes from his essay, A Reason in Common Sense, in the multi-volume work called The Life of Reason. Another very famous line of his is, "Only the dead have seen the end of war." And that's from Soliloquies from London. At Harvard, he taught T.S. Eliot, Robert Frost, Gertrude Stein, and many, many others. Santayana's point is that history is important as a lesson. History is teaching us about the past to help us create a better future. He does not actually believe that it will repeat, but rather that mistakes can be avoided. Learning about the past makes for a better future. That is a lesson that seems lost today. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.